switch on over to Hollywood. Hollywood will be an arm of education or social engineering in a way, because especially when you look at things like how different types of films, different types of shows, cartoons, you mentioned G.I. Joe, they're targeted at different age groups. G.I. Joe is one of the greatest examples because, and I really wish I had have included this in the book. I mentioned it maybe in passing in a couple places, but I actually did some research on the history of that show. And I believe he was a Princeton guy, but one of the early consultants on the show, somebody by the name of like Friedman or something like that. I can't remember. It's listed in the book or somewhere on my website, but he was actually like from the Pentagon, like an Army type guy, and he was consulting on G.I. Joe. I'm not joking about that. And so when you watched, and I went recently and watched the whole first season, and when you actually see HARP, you see mind control, you see MK Ultra, you see all kinds of stuff like that. You see the Federal Reserve and paper money. Yeah, you see all of this, and there's no way that's accidental. That was specific, I believe, recruitment propaganda. That's also a big aspect of Hollywood is films that promote military, promote American foreign policy and war, and also try to engage in recruitment. A lot of films, for example, in the 80s of the Reagan era, like Top Gun, Navy SEALs, which is a terrible movie, Iron Eagle, these are recruitment films. Even comedies like Stripes with Bill Murray.
Wow.
That is a recruitment film. And I'm not joking. There's a whole academics have actually done essays on how Stripes was a recruitment film. And if you watch the movie at the very end, you'll see made in consultation with the Department of Defense.
That's a fact, Jack.
Definitely. Well, I can agree with recruitment films because I'm a 20-year Navy veteran in aviation support equipment, and I can tell you that half the people in the aviation community in the 90s told me that they were recruited by Top Gun, and I was one of those people.
My dad went in the Navy because he watched Top Gun. So I know that's true for a fact.
Oh, there you go. Yeah, we'll tell you to your face. I'm one of those people that was recruited by that movie. So we definitely know the power of media. And you were talking about how Edward Bernays, most people don't know who that is, the father of modern propaganda, and who had been to several of those conferences in World War II, like the big ones, Yalta and Tehran, where all the big three met, Stalin and Churchill and Roosevelt, but also the Treaty of Versailles and all that. So he's very influential. So can you tell us a little bit more about Edward Bernays and explain who that is for the audience before we get into even deeper stuff?
Yeah, he's a relative of Sigmund Freud. So he was very knowledgeable when it came to human psychology, and he attempted to apply a lot of the techniques of advertising, basically, is what propaganda would be. They're one and the same. And so in that regard, the film is also advertising in many ways. And I think they learned a long time ago, even maybe the advent of the camera, they figured out that this was an incredible tool for propaganda. And I don't want to be unfair to all the arts or all of the directors and producers and actors. I'm not saying that everything is bad or everything is propaganda, but I think you have to pay attention to this aspect of Hollywood because it can be very dangerous and it is very powerful. And many films are explicitly propaganda. And I think especially the newer sort of openly made in tandem with the CIA type films like Argo or, I don't know, Zero Dark 30, these kinds of movies, which I touch on, I think, in the last chapter. These are kind of open propaganda of films. There's no question. Ben Affleck was very open about making Argo in tandem with the CIA. It's based on Antonio Mendez's book. He was a CIA guy in charge of disguises, basically. He's like the disguise guy from the Cold War. And then they based Argo, which is about the 1979 revolution and the hostages and all that. I actually think that film is propaganda, but it's interesting because it also includes a bit of predictive programming because it's a black op under the guise of a B movie being shot. If you saw Argo. So it kind of backs up the thesis of my book in an indirect way. But back to Bernays, I mean, he's the guy who got the Department of Defense called the Department of Defense.
Wow.
It used to be called the Department of War. And he said, you know what, guys, that's actually not a very good selling point. Let's let's do a little PR and rename this the Department of Defense. It sounds so much better. So yeah, there's a lot in his book Propaganda, but I think one of the most famous quotes, if people aren't familiar, is right in the first few pages. He says that you are governed by a group of men that you have never seen and will never see, and most of you will never know about this group of men. And the way that they control you is through your I'm paraphrasing, through your desires. And that's what advertising does. That's what social engineering does. That's what psychological warfare is interested in, changing people's minds through their desires.
That's a person I never heard of again. What was his name again?
His name is Edward Bernays. And his book, Propaganda, that he wrote in 1928, he's the father of modern propaganda. And again, together with Ivy Lee, they're the fathers of